Get out of here, Mom. Far away. Julian's words echoed in my ears like a death sentence. He had just handed me a check for $15,000 after selling my $4 million ranch behind my back. My own son Thepison, I trusted most in this world, was kicking me out of my own home as if I were an intruder. But what he didn't know was that I had known about his plans for a week and had already taken steps that would leave him speechless. $15,000, I asked with a smile he mistook for resignation. Is that all I'm worth, to you, after 40 years of building this place? Julian shrugged with a coldness that pierced my heart. Mom, you're getting too old to manage a ranch this big. I sold the property for $4 million. I invested the money in a business that will double our profits, and this is your share, so you can live comfortably somewhere else. He showed me some papers with a forged signature that was supposedly mine. What Julian didn't know was that Owen had come to see me the week before, crying and trembling with rage. Mom, I heard Julian on the phone with a lawyer. They're planning to forge your signature and sell the ranch. He said he already has a buyer and the tour too senile to notice. My younger son had risked his relationship with his brother to save me from this betrayal, and thanks to him, I had been able to prepare for this moment. For 40 years, I had built this ranch with my own tools. I arrived here a young widow with 2 small children and $100 in my. I worked 8. My hands became covered in my back bent under the weight of feed sacks. But I never gave up. Every tree I planted, every fence I built, every animal I raised carried my sweat and my blood. This land wasn't just property. It was me soul materialized into $4 million of honest work. Julian was always different from Owen. From a young age, he would ask how much money we made, what the ranch was worth, when it would be his, while I woke up at dawn to milk the cows. He slept in late, while I negotiated with international buyers. He was out partying with the money I gave him. I paid for his college, his car, his wedding, his failed business ventures, always believing that one day he would appreciate my sacrifice. But the only thing he saw was an old woman standing between him and his inheritance. Mom, you're 67 years old, he told me as he put the forged documents back in his briefcase. It's time you stop being stubborn and accept that you can't keep living alone in such a big place. With $15,000, you can rent an apartment in the city and live peacefully for the rest of your life. His tone was condescending, as if he were talking to a spoiled child. Besides, the buyer has already paid, and I've already invested the money. There's no turning back. I rose from my chair slowly, feeling every fiber of my being filled with a strength I hadn't felt in years. Julian thought he had defeated me, that he had taken everything I had fought for. But what he didn't know Waste had during that week, while he was celebrating his brilliant plan. I had been very busy with my lawyer, Claire, preparing the biggest surprise of his life. The same determination that had led me to build a $4 million empire would now serve to show him that no one, not even my own son, was going to humiliate me like that. All right, Julian, I said with a calm that reassured him. I accept your proposal, but before I go, I want us to have a dinner together one last time. As a farewell, he smiled, believing he had finally broken my will. Of course, Mom, I'll book a table at the fanciest restaurant in the city. You deserve it. What Julian didn't know was that this dinner would be the stage where his world would completely fall apart. The photograph of the ranch rested on the table, showing for decades of honest work. Soon, my son would discover that stealing from a woman who built an empire with her own hands was not as easy as he had thought. That night, I couldn't sleep. Julian's words echoed in my head like a painful refrain. Get out of here, Mom. Far away. I got up several times to walk through the house, touching each piece of furniture, each photograph, each object I had bought with my own effort. The ranch wasn't just my home. It was the physical testament to everything I had achieved against all odds. And now my own son wanted to erase me from history as if I had never existed. At dawn, I called Claire, my trusted lawyer. Margaret, I need you to come to my office immediately, she said with urgency in her voice. I have news about what you told me yesterday. I drove to the city with a racing heart, knowing my future depended on what Claire had discovered. During the drive, I remembered how I had met this extraordinary woman 3 years ago, when Julian began pressuring me to put the ranch in his name. Claire was different from all the lawyers I had met. She didn't treat me like an ignorant old woman, but like a successful businesswoman who deserved respect. When I told her my suspicion about Julian's intentions, she didn't downplay my concerns. Margaret, cases of financial abuse against seniors are on the rise, and sadly, many involve close family members. She had told me with complete frankness, "We need to protect your assets before it's too late." "Sit down, Margaret," Claire said when he arrived at her office. Her serious face confirmed the news wasn't good. "I investigated the documents Julian showed you yesterday. The signature is a forgery, obviously, but he has already filed those papers with the countercourt's office. Officially, according to the system, the ranch is no longer yours." I felt the world collapse beneath me feet. "But," Claire continued with a smile that restored my hope, "what Julian doesn't know is that last week when you came in, alarmed by Owen's information, we already took preventive measures." Claire opened a thick folder full of official documents. "Remember when you signed those papers last Monday? You notably transferred the ranch to an irrevocable trust, but you also established very specific clauses. According to these documents, you are the sole lifetime beneficiary of the trust, and only you can make decisions about the property. Furthermore, any attempt at a fraudulent sale is automatically void." Tears of relief streamed down my cheeks as Claire continued explaining. "There's more," Claire said with satisfaction. "We also installed hidden security cameras in your house last week and recorded the entire conversation yesterday when Julian gave you the check. We have complete evidence of his criminal intentions." She showed me the recordings on her computer. Seeing my own son speak so coldly about robbing me broke my heart, but it also filled me with a steely determination. "And what about the money Julian claims to have invested?" I asked with concern. Claire smiled in a way I hadn't seen. "That's Julian's problem, not yours. He sold something that didn't belong to him to a buyer who will send discover. He can't take possession of the property. When the buyer demands his $4 million back, Julian will have to explain where that money is." The poetic justice of the situation made me smile for the first time in days. I returned to the ranch, feeling like a warrior prepared for battle. That afternoon, Julian called to confirm "Mom, I've booked a table at the Summit Grill for tomorrow at 8. It will be a very special dinner," he said with that false sweetness that now nauseated me. "Perfect, son. I have a surprise for you, too," I replied with a smile he couldn't see over the phone. That night, I called Owen to tell him everything. "Mom, I can't believe what Julian is doing," he said, his voice breaking. "I knew he coveted the ranch, but I never thought he'd go this far." I explained the entire plan. Claire and I had "I want you to come to the restaurant tomorrow, but don't say anything to Julian. I need you to be a witness to everything that's about to happen." Owen agreed immediately, a mix of nervousness and admiration in his. The morning of the dinner, I woke up early to get ready. One chose my most elegant red dress, the one I had bought when I turned 60, to celebrate for decades of successful work. I did my makeup with special care, styled my hair as if for a party, and put on the pearl earrings my late husband had given me on our 20th anniversary. If Julian wanted a farewell dinner, I would give him one he would never forget. As I dressed, he remembered all the times Julian had tried to convince me to sell the ranch. "Have something very special prepared for tonight." He smiled, believing I had finally accepted my defeat. What he didn't know was that in the next few minutes his world would crumble like a house of cards, and the woman he had underestimated for so many years was about to show him what she was really made of. Julian ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, as if celebrating the greatest victory of his life. "Mom, I want to toast to your new chapter," he said as the waiter poured the golden liquid into our glasses. "I know it will be hard to adjust at first, but you'll see that living in the city will be much better for you." His smile was so fake, it made me want to scream the truth at him right then and there. But I held back. The show was just beginning. "Of course, son," I replied, raising my glass with a serenity that calmed him to new beginnings. Julian toasted with me, unaware he was celebrating his own destruction. As I drank, I watched every detail of his face, wondering when exactly I had lost the sweet boy he once was, replaced by this cold, calculating man before me. "Mom, there's something else I need to tell you," Julian began, after several sips of wine. His tone turned more serious, more businesslike. "The buyer of the ranch wants to take possession next week. I need you to pack your personal things and be out by Friday." The coldness with which he spoke those words confirmed that to him I was no longer his mother, but simply an obstacle to be removed. "So soon?" I asked, finding surprise. "I thought I'd have more time to say goodbye to everything." Julian sighed impatiently, as if my feelings were a minor inconvenience. "Mom, don't make this harder than it already is. I've already found a perfect apartment for you downtown. It's furnished, has 24-hour security, and is close to the hospital in case you need medical attention. The way he talked about my future, as if I were an invalid old woman, filled me with an indignation I had to hide. As Julian continued to describe my new life, I saw and entered the restaurant out of the corner of my eye, and sit discreetly at a table in the back. My younger son looked nervous but determined. We had agreed he would arrive half an hour after the dinner began to witness everything that was about to unfold. Seeing his worried face reminded me why I was doing this. He wasn't just defending my property. I was also protecting my good son from his brother's Julian, there's something I don't understand, I said when he finished speaking. If the ranch was worth $4 million, and you sold it for that price, where is the rest of the money? You only gave me $15,000. Julian took another sip of wine before answering, as if needing liquid courage for what he was about to say. Mom, I invested that money in a business that will give us much greater returns, he explained. With the forced patience of Samayan speaking to a child, I bought shares in a tech company that's about to revolutionize the Latin American market. In 5 years, that $4 million will turn into $20 million. His enthusiasm was genuine, which made it all the more pathetic. My son had sold my entire life for a business dream that was probably as fake as his filial love. And what if that business doesn't work out? I asked with apparent innocence. What will happen to the money from the ranch? Julian laughed condescendingly. Mom, you didn't understand investments. I studied business administration. I have connections in the financial world. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. The irony of him asking for my trust after stealing everything I had was so immense, I almost laughed out loud. The waiter brought our main courses, but I could barely eat. Every bite tasted off. Every sip of wine reminded me I was dining with the enemy. Julian, on the other hand, ate with appetite as if it were a celebratory meal. Mom, I know this is hard for you, he said while cutting his steak, but think of all you're going to gain. You won't have to wake up at dawn to milk cows anymore. You won't have to worry about the harvests. You won't have to deal with problematic employees. You'll be able to rest as you deserve. What Julian didn't understand was that I didn't want to rest. Those early mornings, those worries, those daily challenges were what gave my life meaning. The ranch wasn't a burden to be eliminated, but the engine that kept me alive, active, and with purpose. And what if I don't want to rest? I asked softly. What if he wanted to keep working my land until the last day of my life? Julian stopped eating and looked at me with a mix of frustration and pity. Mom, you're 67 years old. You're not at an age for that kind of physical labor anymore. You could get hurt, get sick, even die alone in that remote place. His concern sounded so false it made me want to throw up. Besides, the deal is done. The papers are signed. The money there's no going back. The papers are signed, I repeated slowly. What papers, Julian? He took the same documents from his briefcase that he had shown me the day before. These papers, Mom, here is your signature, authorizing the sale of the ranch. He showed me the page where a signature appeared that was supposedly mine, but which I had never made. When did I sign this? I asked, my voice trembling. Julian looked me in the eye with a coldness that chilled my blood. Mom, you signed this a month ago when you came to visit me. Don't you remember? The lie was so blatant that for a moment I was speechless. My Aunson was accusing me of silly to justify his theft. You told me you no longer wanted the responsibility of managing the ranch, that you'd rather I take care of everything, he continued with complete Julian, I said, a voice I barely recognized as my own. I never signed those papers. I never told you I wanted to sell. That is not my signature. His face hardened immediately. Mom, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You're starting to have memory problems. That's why you need to move to the city where I can get the medical attention you need. The manipulation was so brutal, I felt a wave of nausea. Memory problems, I repeated in disbelief. Are you saying I'm senile? Julian sighed as if this were a conversation he'd had to have many times. Mom, it's not your fault, it's part of aging, but that's precisely why I made these decisions for you, to protect you from yourself. The cruelty of his words left me breathless. He hadn't just robbed me, he was now trying to convince me I was crazy. At that moment, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Claire, my lawyer, who had arrived punctually according to our plan. Good evening, Margaret, she said with a warm smile. I hope you don't mind me joining you. Julian looked at me confused. Who is this woman, Mom? His tone was no longer condescending, but genuinely worried. Control of the situation was beginning to slip from his grasp. Julian, I said with a smile that was finally genuine, I'd like you to meet Claire. She's my lawyer. She has something very interesting to tell you about those papers you just showed me. Julian's face turned pale as Claire took a seat beside us. The farewell dinner was about to become the confrontation Myson had never imagined. Julian's face changed completely when Claire sat at our table. His arrogant confidence, morphodinto, visible nervousness like a child caught in the middle of some mischief. Mom, what's going on here? He asked Ina, voice that tried to sound firm but trembled slightly. Why did you bring your lawyer to a family dinner? His eyes darted between Claire and me, trying to figure out what was happening. Julian, allow me to introduce myself formally, Claire said with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm Dr. Claire Ramirez, an attorney specializing in estate law and elder protection. Your mother hired me last week after her younger son alerted her to certain plans you had regarding her property. The way she pronounced the word plans made Julian turn even paler. I don't know what you're talking about, Julian muttered, but his voice lacked the conviction he had shown minutes earlier. Mom simply authorized me to sell the ranch because she can no longer manage it alone. Everything is perfect legal. Claire opened her briefcase and took out a thick folder full of documents. Legal. That's very interesting. Julian, could you explain to me then why the signature on these documents doesn't match any of the authentic signatures your mother has made in the last 40 years? Julian took the papers Claire handed him, and I could see his hands shaking as he examined them. This must be a mistake, he stammered. Mom signed these documents voluntarily. I was there when she did it. Claire pulled another document from her folder. Are you referring to this occasion? She asked, showing him a photograph I hadn't seen before. The image clearly showed Julian sitting alone in his office, signing the papers himself. Where did you get that photo? Julian asked in a whisper. His face had lost all its color, and beads of sweat were starting to form on his forehead. Julian, did you really think you could commit document fraud without leaving a trace? Claire replied with a calm that brutally contrasted with my son's growing panic. We have security cameras in the building where you have your office. We also have recordings of the phone calls where you discussed this plan with your accomplice. What accomplice? I asked genuinely. This information was new to me. Claire glanced at me briefly before. Javier Montenegro, the supposed buyer of the ranch, turns out to be Julian's partner in this scam. That plan was for Javier to buy the property at an inflated price. Then Julian would return the difference in cash, keeping the remaining $4 million for his investments. Julian clung to his wineglass as if it were a life raft in a storm. That's not true, Julian murmured. But his denial sounded desperate. Javier is a legitimate buyer. He wants the ranch to develop a tourist project. Claire smiled in a way that made me proud to have chosen her as my lawyer. Julian, Javier Montenegro doesn't exist. It's a false identity you created using fraudulent documents. The bank account where he supposedly deposited the $4 million is in your name. The restaurant seemed to have faded away around us. Only the three of us existed at this table, and the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mom, Julian said, turning to me with pleading eyes, you know me. I would never hurt you. There must be a misunderstanding. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares, and my maternal heart softened slightly. But then I remembered the $15,000 check and his order to get far away from here. Julian, is what Claire says true? I asked in a voice that sounded strangely calm, even to me. Did you really forge my signature to steal the ranch from me? My older son looked him directly in the eye, and for a second I thought he would tell the truth. But instead, his face hardened, and the cold, calculating man I had known in recent years reappeared. Mom, you don't understand what's happening, Julian said with renewed arrogance. Yes, maybe I took some liberties with those documents, but it was all for your own good. You no longer have the mental capacity to make important finance. Someone had to protect the family assets before you did something senile and crazy. The cruelty of his words hit me like a physical slap. Claire intervened before I could respond. Julian, are you aware that you have just confessed to committing document fraud, financial abuse of a senior, and forgery of official documents? Because all of this is being recorded. She pointed to a small digital recorder she had discreetly placed on the table. Julian realized he had fallen into a perfectly orchestrated trap. Furthermore, Claire continued relentlessly, I want to inform you that the ranch could never have been legally sold because last week your mother transferred it to an irrevocable trust. She is the sole lifetime beneficiary, and any subsequent sale is automatically void. Julian looked at me with an expression of absolute shock. What does that mean? He asked in a hoarse voice. It means, my dear son, I said, finally finding my voice, that not only can you not sell my ranch, but you now have a very big problem. The supposed buyer, Javier Montenegro, who according to Clara's has received a property that he legally cannot possess. Where are the $4 million you supposedly paid for it? The realization of his situation hit Julian like a tsunami. I invested that money, Julian stammered. It's in shares of a tech company. I can get it back. Claire shook her head. Julian, we investigated a supposed investment. The company Innovate Americas doesn't exist. It's another shell company you created to hide the money. Where is the $4 million? Really? Julian slumped in his chair, like a deflated balloon. At that moment, Owen approached our table. Sorry to interrupt, he said in a tense voice, but I think Julian should know that the bank has already frozen all his accounts for suspicious activity. Julian looked up at his younger brother with an expression of utter defeat. Owen, you're involved in this, too. His voice sounded like that of a man who has just discovered his whole world has fallen apart. Involved in protecting our mother from your betrayal. Yes, Julian, I'm very involved, Owen replied with a firmness I had rarely seen in him. I was the one who told Mom about your plans. I was Theon who convinced her to call Claire, and I was the one who contacted the banking authorities when I discovered the fraudulent transfers. Julian looked at his brother as if seeing him for the first time. Why? Julian asked, his voice breaking. Why did you betray me? Owen sat next to him and put a hand on his. Julian, I didn't betray you. You betrayed our family when you decided to steal everything Mom had worked for over 40 years. You betrayed your own mother when you treated her like she was a senile nuisance. Tears began to roll down Owen's cheeks. The waiter approached nervously to ask if everything was all right, clearly uncomfortable with the tension emanating from our table. Everything is perfectly fine, I said with a smile that probably looked ferocious. My family is just having a very necessary conversation about honesty and respect. The waiter quickly retreated, no doubt relieved not to be involved in our family drama. Julian looked up at me, his eyes full of tears. Mom, I'm sorry. I know I'm at a mistakes, but I did it all thinking about the family's future. Claire and I exchanged a look after everything that had happened. My older son was still trying to manipulate me with excuses and justifications. The transformation of Miss Sweetboy into this selfish, cruel man was complete, and there was no going back. Julian's tears didn't move me, Ash had hoped. For 40 years, I had learned to distinguish between genuine repentance and desperate manipulation. Julian, I said, my voice firmer than I felt, if you had really thought about the family's future, you would have spoken to me before making decisions about my life and my property. His sobs intensified, but I was no longer the mother who melted at her children's tears. Mom, please, Julian begged, clinging to my hand. I know I messed up, but we can fix all of this. I can return the money. I can cancel the investments. I can make everything go back to normal. His desperation was palpable, but it also revealed that he still didn't understand the magnitude of what he had done. Julian, where exactly is the money you supposedly invested? Claire asked with a patience I knew was purely professional. Julian wiped his eyes with his napkin and tried to recompose his businesslike posture. The money is in an offshore investment account. It's a complex process, but I can access it in a few days. Claire pulled another folder from her briefcase. Julian, are you referring to the account in the Cayman Islands that you opened last week under the name JM Holdings? Because that account is also being investigated for money laundering. Julian's face fell completely. How is it possible you know all this? Julian muttered, more to himself than to us. Julian, when you decide to steal $4 million from your own mother, you automatically trigger multiple banking alert systems, Claire explained with a professional coolness that impressed me. International transfers of that magnitude, without legitimate business justification, are always investigated by financial authorities. Owen took Julian's hand with genuine sadness. Brother, how did we get to this point? When did you decide that money was more important than our mother? Julian looked up at Owen with a mix of resentment and desperation. You don't understand, Owen. You were always the favorite son, the one who never had to worry about money. I'm the oldest. I should have inherited the ranch automatically, the favorite. I repeated in disbelief. Julian, I treated you both exactly the same. It gave you the same opportunities, the same education, the same love. Julian let out a bitter laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. The same love, Mom. Owen always got to do what he went off to study art, married whoever he wanted, never had to prove anything. I had to study business, Beckos. You said someone had to understand business to help you with the ranch. The revelation hit me like a lightning bolt. For all these years, Julian had harbored a resentment I had never perceived. Julian, I never forced you to study business. You told me you wanted to do it because you were interested in business. Julian shook his head violently. I wanted to study music, Mom. I wanted to be a composer. But you needed someone who understood numbers and contracts. So I sacrificed my dreams for the family. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. Owen looked at me in surprise, clearly unaware of this version of the story. Claire watched everything with professional interest. Probably accustomed to family conflicts, revealing deep wounds during these types of confrontations. Julian, I finally said, if you felt forced to study something you didn't want, why did you never tell me? What for? Julian the ranch was always your number one priority. Your plants, your animals, your crops, we were secondary. Owen understood that and went to live his own life. I stayed waiting for the moment you would finally acknowledge my sacrifice. His words hurt me more than he wanted to admit, because there was some truth to them. Julian, it's true. The ranch was very important to me. I admitted honestly. It was my way of securing a future for both of you. But that doesn't justify you stealing Gavir thing. I worked for over 40 years. Julian covered his face with his hands. I didn't want to steal from you, Mom. I wanted you to finally see me as your partner, as your rightful heir. I wanted to prove that I could multiply the value of the ranch through smart investments. Claire intervened gently. Julian, do you understand? There are legal ways to express those aspirations. You could have proposed a business plan to You could have asked to be included as a partner in the ranch's operation. You could have suggested investing part of the profits in other projects. Julian looked up with an expression that mixed desperation and I tried, Julian said, his voice breaking. For years, I proposed Adidas to expand the business, to modernize operations, to diversify investments. But Mom always told me the ranch was fine as it was, that it didn't need changes. I realized Julian was right about this. I had been very conservative with my decisions, perhaps too resistant to change, but that didn't give you the right to make unilateral decisions about my property, I said firmly. If you wanted changes, you should have insisted more. You should have found ways to convince me, not to deceive me. Julian nodded slowly, as if were finally understanding the gravity of his actions. I know, Mom, I know, and I hate myself for it. But when I saw the investment opportunity in Innovate, I thought I could prove my worth without having to ask your permission, Julian. Owen intervened gently. Innovate doesn't exist. Clary already explained that. What did you really invest the money in? Julian was silent for several minutes, clearly debating internally whether to tell the truth or continue lying. Finally, he sighed deeply. I invested it in cryptocurrency, he admitted in a bare-lightable voice. I thought I could triple the money in a few months and give Mom back her ranch, plus a spec. The confession landed on the table like a bomb. Crypto, I repeated in disbelief. Julian, you gambled for $1 million of my money on cryptocurrency, without my knowledge. Claire leaned forward with professional interest. Julian, could you be more specific? What kind of crypto? Through what platform? Julian looked like a man who had just admitted to his own financial suicide. I invested in several new cryptocurrencies that promised extraordinary returns, Julian mumbled. Luna Coin, Galaxy Token, Ephebethers, whose names I can't remember. The investment advisor assured me they were unique opportunities. Claire and Owen exchanged a horrified look. Julian, Owen said, his voice trembling, those are classic crypto scams. How much money is left? Julian completely slumped in his. According to my last statement, there's about $300,000 left. The rest was lost when several of the coins collapsed last week. The silence that followed was absolute. 4 million Radusato, 300,000 in a matter of days. The magnitude of the loss was so great that my brain refused to fully process it. 300,000, I repeated slowly. Julian, you list $3,700,000 in 1 week. Julian nodded without looking up, like a child who has just broken the most valuable vase in the house. I thought it was a temporary market correction. The advisor told me investments have initial volatility. Claire closed her eyes for a moment, probably calculating the legal implications of this revelation. Julian, do you have the documents for these investments, contracts, receipts, communications with this supposed advisor? Claire asked with an urgency she hadn't shown before. Julian rummaged through his briefcase and pulled out several wrinkled papers. Here are some documents, but most of the transactions were digital. Claire examined the papers quickly, her expression growing increasingly somber. Julian, these are not legitimate investment documents, Claire said after reviewing everything. These are forms from a cryptocurrency pyramid scheme. Not only did you lose your mother's money, but you were the victim of massive fraud. Julian looked up with a spark of hope. Does that mean I can get the money back? Claire shook her head sadly. It means the scammer shave already disappeared with the money, and the chances of recovery are practically nil. The reality of the situation finally settled over all of us. Julian had not only betrayed my trust and stolen my property, but he had irreversibly lost a fortune that represented 4 decades of work. That poetic justice was brutal. The son, who wanted to prove his financial superiority, had fallen for the most basic scam in the digital world. The devastation on Julian's face was complete. He had not only lost his family's respect, but had financially destroyed what he so desperately wanted to possess. Mom, he murmured, his voice barely audible. What am I going to do now? I have no way to pay you back. My house is my credit cards are maxed out, and now the authorities have frozen the accounts. For the first time that night, I saw genuine vulnerability instead of calculated manipulation. That is no longer my responsibility, I told him with a firmness that surprised even myself. You made these decisions without consulting me, assuming you had a right over my life and my property. Now you have to face the consequences of your actions. Claire nodded in agreement as she organized the documents she had just. Margaret is right. Julian, you are a 42-year-old adult. The decisions you made were yours, and so are the consequences. Owen took his brother's hand with genuine compassion. Julian, I'll help you in any way I can, but first, you need to understand that what you did was terribly wrong. Julian squeezed Owen's hand as if it were his last lifeline. Are you going to report me to the police? Mom, he asked Taryn, his eyes. The question hit me hard because despite everything, he was still me son. Claire answered before I could. Julian, technically, you've already been. The banks automatically reported the suspicious transactions to the financial authorities. Document fraud, forgery of signatures, and financial abuse of a senior are serious crimes that are prosecuted automatically. Julian turned as white as a sheet. Does that mean I'm going to jail? It depends on many factors, Claire explained professionally. Your cooperation with the investigation, your willingness to return what's left of the money, and your mother's decision on whether she wants to proceed with additional civil charges. All eyes turned to me. The most difficult decision of my life was in my hands. It could send my own son to prison, or find another way to seek justice. Julian, I want you to listen to me very clearly, I said after several minutes of tense silence. What you did not only stole money from me, but it destroyed the trust I had placed in you for 42 years. You treated me as if I were a senile old woman, who deserved neither respect nor consideration. Julian began to sob again, but this time it seemed genuine. Mom, I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to impress you. Impress me by robbing me? I asked in disbelief. Impress me by treating me like a nuisance to be removed? Julian shook his head desperately. No, Mom. I wanted to impress you by multiplying the money, giving you back the ranch with him, proving that I could be the successful son you always wanted. His words revealed a deep distortion of reality that genuinely worried me. Julian, I never wanted you to be different from who you were. I just wanted you to be honest, hard work, and to respect others. That financial success was never my priority for either of you. Owen nodded vigorously. Mom always told us that the important thing was to be good people, not rich people. Julian looked at his brother as if he had just heard this for the first time. Claire cleared her throat gently to get our attention. Margaret, we need to discuss next legal steps. Julian will have to face the criminal charges regardless of what you decide, but you can influence the civil penalties. I took a moment to process all the information. My son had committed serious crimes, had lost a fortune, and now his future depended partly on my decisions. Claire, what are my options? I finally asked. You can proceed with a full civil lawsuit seeking recovery of all damage plus additional penalties, or you can negotiate a settlement that includes the return of the remaining $300,000 plus a payment plan for the rest in exchange for not proceeding with some of the civil charges. Julian looked at me with desperate pleading in his eyes. And if I choose the full lawsuit, I asked, Julian would lose everything he has: his house, his car, any remaining assets. Additionally, the penalties called include punitive damages that would keep him in debt for life. The severity of the options struck me. Part of me wanted Julian to pay completely for what he had done, but another part remembered the little boy he once was. Mom, please, Julian begged, tears streaming down his cheeks. I know I didn't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise I will do everything I can to make it up to you. I will work day and night. I will sell everything I have. I will find ways to pay back every dollar I lost. His promises sounded sincere, but I had learned to distrust easily. Julian, how can I trust your promises after what you've done? I asked him directly. How do I know this isn't another manipulation to avoid the consequences of your actions? Julian wiped his eyes and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in years. Because I now understand that I lost the most important thing I had, your respect and your trust. Money can be recovered, but that may be never. Mom, can I suggest something? I nodded, valuing his perspective. What if we give Julian a chance to prove he's serious, but with very strict conditions? Claire raised her eyebrows with professional interest. What kind of conditions do you have in mind? Julian immediately returns the $300,000 that are left, sells his house and his car to generate more restitution funds, and agrees to work on the ranch without a salary until he is compensated for a significant part of the damage Owen proposed. Furthermore, all of this would be legally supervised with monthly reports to Claire on his financial. Julian nodded desperately at the proposal. That's interesting, Claire said, but we would need to add clear consequences if Julian fails to comply with the terms of the agreement, and we will also need guarantees that he won't be able to access any of Margaret's assets again without legal supervision. Julian seemed willing to accept any condition that would save him from complete ruin. And what about the family? I asked, getting to the heart of the matter. How do we rebuild the trust that you destroyed, Julian? This question was more important to me than any financial consideration. Julian took several minutes before answering, clearly thinking deeply about his response. Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for another chance, Julian finally said, but if you allow me to work on the ranch, not as your heir or your partner, but as your employee, maybe over the next few years, I can prove that I am capable of respecting your work and your authority. His humility seemed genuine, but I knew that words were easy when someone was desperate. Julian, the work on the ranch is hard, I warned him. It means waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, working under the sun, getting your hands dirty, doing tasks you consider beneath your college education. Are you really willing to do that? Julian nodded vigorously. Mom, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to earn back your respect, even if it takes the rest of my life. Claire took notes as we spoke. If we decide to proceed with a supervised agreement, we'll need to establish various restitution amount, payment schedule, working conditions, consequences for not, and a clearly defined probationary period. Julian immediately agreed to all the legal requirements Claire mentioned. There's one more condition, I finalized, feeling it was time to set the most important boundary. Julian, if you accept this agreement, you can never again question my decisions about the ranch, or pressure me to make changes I didn't want. My property is mine, and my decisions are final. Julian noted. I understand completely, Mom. I will not cross those boundaries again. The restaurant had almost completely emptied while we were having this conversation that would change our lives forever. The waiter discreetly approached to ask if we needed anything else, clearly hoping we would fit. Just a few more minutes, I told him kindly. The most important decisions of our lives could not be rushed for the convenience of a restaurant. I made a decision that would change our lives forever. Julian, I am going to give you one chance to redeem yourself, but it will be on my terms and with complete legal supervision, I announced with a firmness that resonated across the. You have exactly 1 year to prove you can be the son I raised, not the con man you became. Julian looked at me with a mixture of relief and terror, understanding this was likely his last chance. Claire, prepare a contract that includes everything we've discussed, I continued. Julian will immediately return the remaining $300,000, sell all his assets to generate additional restitution funds, and work in my ranch without a salary for 12 months. Claire nodded as she took detailed notes. Furthermore, I want monthly reports on his progress, and if he violates any term of the agreement, we will immediately proceed with the civil lawsuit. Julian wiped away his tears and looked me directly in the eye. Mom, I accept all the terms. I promise you I will work harder than I have ever worked in my entire life. His voice trembled, but there was a determination in it I hadn't heard in years. But I need you to understand something, Julian, I said sternly. This is not a reconciliation. This is a supervised work opportunity. Trust will be earned day by day, and it could take years to rebuild what you destroyed in one night. Owen took his brother's hand, his own emotion palpable. Julian, I'm proud of Mom for giving you this chance, and I hope you value it as it deserves. Julian nodded solemnly at his younger brother. Owen, thank you for protecting Mom when I was betraying her. You're a better man than I am, and I hope to learn from you during this process. The genuine humility in Julian's voice gave him the first real hope that maybe, just maybe, we could heal this family wound. Now, let's talk about the specific conditions, Claire said, organizing her documents. Julian, tomorrow morning, you need to transfer the remaining $300,000 to a restitution account that I will manage. Then you have 30 days to sell your house, your car, and any other valuable asset. Julian nodded without. Where will I live during this period? He asked with genuine concern. On the ranch with me, I replied, surprising him, but not in the main house. There's a small cabin where the seasonal workers stay. You will live there under the same conditions as any employee on the ranch. Julian swallowed nervously. With no special privileges for being your son. I shook my head firmly. No special privileges. In fact, with greater supervision for being the son who betrayed my trust. Claire continued laying out the legal terms. Julian, you also need to understand that during this one-year probation, you will not be able to make any significant financial decisions without supervision. No investments, no loans, no new bank. Julian accepted every restriction without protest. I understand. I need to prove I can handle BOFTIC responsibilities before being trusted with important decisions. There's something else, I added seriously. Julian, during this year, you are going to learn every aspect of the ranch work. You will milk cows. You will plant, but you will repair fences. You will clean stables. You will physically understand what it means to build something with your own hands. Julian nodded vigorously. Mom, I'm ready for that. I want to truly understand what you've done all these years. Owen smiled for the first time all night. Julian, I think this work is going to change your perspective on a lot of things. Julian looked at his brother with curiosity. What do you mean? Owen reflected for a moment before answering. When you work the land with your own hands, you understand that money isn't just numbers in a bank account. Every dollar represents sweat, effort, sacrifice. Maybe that will help you value what Mom built. You also need to understand, I continued, that your relationship with me will fundamentally change. You are no longer my son who can ask for favors or expect special. You are my employee who has to earn every opportunity he receives. Julian nodded solemnly. I understand, Mom. I know I lost the right to be treated as your son when I betrayed you. I hope I can earn that place back over time. Claire closed her folder with Margaret, I believe this agreement is fair yet firm. It gives Julian a chance to redeem himself while completely protecting your interests. I turned to Julian with the most serious expression I could muster. Julian, I want you to understand that if you fail in this agreement, there will not be a third chance. I will proceed with the full lawsuit and cut off all relations with you permanently. I understand completely, Mom, Julian responded, his voice broken, but determined. This is my last chance to be your son again, and I will not waste it. His words sounded sincere, but I knew that actions would be the only true indicator of his intentions. Good. Then we start tomorrow. Be at the ranch at 5 o'clock in Thimarin, ready to work. The waiter approached again, clearly needing to close the restaurant. Excuse me, but we need to close in 15 minutes, he informed us politely. Claire began to pack her documents. Perfect. I think we've covered everything necessary for tonight. We'll meet at my office tomorrow to sign the official agreement. Julian nodded nervously, probably processing everything he had agreed to. As we stood up from the table, Owen hugged Julian with tears in his eyes. Brother, I'm proud of you for accepting this opportunity. I know it's going to be hard, but I think it's exactly what you need. Julian returned a hug with intensity. Owen, thank you for not giving up on me, despite what I did. I need you to help me stay on the right path this year. Julian, I finally said, there's one more thing you need to understand. During these 12 months, you're not just going to work to compensate for the money you lost. You're going to work to rebuild the respect you destroyed, the trust you betrayed, and the family relationship you almost ruined forever. Julian looked at me with a humility I hadn't seen since he was a child. Mom, I know I don't deserve this chance, but I promise I will do everything possible to be worthy of it. Claire walked us to the restaurant door. Margaret, I'm impressed by your wisdom in handling the situation. You're giving Julian a chance to redeem himself, but with complete legal protections for yourself. You thanked Claire for all her professional help. I couldn't have handled this without your legal expertise. I'll see you tomorrow for the official documents. When we stepped out into the cool night air, I felt as though I had just emerged from an epic battle. Julian's betrayal had been devastating, but at least now there was a path forward. Julian, I said before we parted ways, remember, tomorrow at 5 o'clock sharp, you'll be working like any other employee on there. Don't be late. Julian nodded solemnly. I won't fail you, Mom. This time, I won't fail you. Owen offered to drive me home, but I preferred to drive alone to process everything that had happened. On the way back to the ranch, I reflected on the most intense night of my life. My son had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible, but I had shown that a 6-7-year-old woman could defend herself and set firm boundaries. The future was uncertain, but at least now it was on my terms. When I arrived at the ranch and saw my lands bathed in the moonlight, I felt a deep satisfaction. This land was still mine. My 40 years off work were protected, and maybe, just maybe, I would have the chance to get my lost son back. But this time, it would be under my rules and on my terms. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands was not going to be defeated by anyone's betrayal, not even her own son's. 3 months after that night, that changed our lives forever. I woke up as always at 4:30 in the morning. The alarm clock was no longer necessary. My body had developed an internal clock after 4 decades of early mornings on. As I dressed, I heard footsteps in the yard outside. Julian was already awake, preparing for another day of work that would start promptly at 5. The first few days had been brutal for him. His hands, accustomed to holding documents and calculators, were covered in blisters after the first week of physical labor. His back, which had never carried more than a briefcase, ached from lifting sacks of feed and heavy tools. But to my surprise, Julian never complained once. Every morning he showed up on time, ready to learn and work. Good morning, Mom. Julian greeted me when I stepped out of the main house. His appearance had changed drastically in these 3 months. His skin was tanned by the sun, his hands calloused, his muscles developed from physical labor. But more important than his external transformation was the change in his attitude. There was no arrogance in his voice anymore, only genuine respect and a humility he was learning day by day. Good morning, Julian, I replied with the professional neutrality I had maintained these past months. It wasn't coldness, but the necessary distance between an employer and her employee. Today, we're going to check the north sector of the pecan orchard. The trees need pruning and fertilization. Julian nodded and went to get the necessary tools without me having to tell him. He had learned the routine quickly. As we walked toward the orchard, I watched how Julian interacted with the trees. At first, he treated them like objects to be manipulated to complete a task, but gradually, he had begun to understand that each tree was a living being that required specific, careened attention. This tree looks sick, he commented, pointing to a pecan tree with yellowish leaves. His observation was correct. What do you think might be causing that? I asked, testing his learning. Julian moved closer to examine the tree. It could be too much water, a lack of nutrients, or maybe some kind of pest. His answer showed he had been paying attention during the lessons I had given him on plant care. Very good. And what would you do to fix it? Julian thought for a moment before answering. First, I'd check the soil drainage to make sure there's no waterlogging. Then, I'd examine the leaves for signs of pests or diseases. Finally, I'd adjust the fertilization based on what I find. I was impressed by the methodology of his response. He was learning to think like a farmer, not just follow orders. During these 3 months, Claire had religiously monitored Julian's progress. He had complied with all the conditions of the agreement. He transferred the remaining $300,000, sold his house and car, and turned overall the additional funds generated. The total recovered so far was about $550,000, a fraction of what was lost, but a significant start. Mom, can I ask you a personal question? Julian said as we pruned the pecan trees. It was the first time in 3 months he had dared to start a conversation that wasn't strictly about work. You can ask, I replied, keeping my focus on the pruning. Will you ever be able to forgive me for what I did? The question hit me harder than I expected. I stopped and looked at him directly. Julian, Forgiveness isn't something that's given out like a prize for good behavior. It's something that's built day by day, decision by decision, action by action. Julian nodded solemnly, clearly understanding there were no isms. You're proving that you can be reliable in daily tasks, but deep trust takes years to rebuild. I understand, Julian replied sincerely. I just wanted you to know that every day I work here, I understand better what I destroyed when I betrayed you. This land isn't just money or property. It's your life, your identity, your legacy. His words moved me because they reflected an understanding that had been absent for years. I'm glad you finally understand that, I told him softly. That afternoon, Owen came to visit, as he did every weekend. The dynamic between the brothers had completely changed. Owen no longer had to protect me from Julian. Now, he could relate to him as a brother was genuinely trying to change. How do you feel after 3 months of physical labor? Owen asked Julian as we had tired, but satisfied. Julian answered honestly. It's strange, but there's something gratifying in seeing the physical result of your work at the end of the day. Owen smiled. That's exactly what Mom always tried to teach us when we were kids. Julian nodded wistfully. You're right. It's a shame it took me so long to understand. During dinner, Julian told me about his interactions with the other ranch hands. At first, they looked at me with suspicion. He admitted they knew I was your son, and they probably knew something had happened. But gradually, when they saw I was willing to do the same work they did, they started to accept me. I was glad to know that Julian was earning respect through actions, not titles. There's something I want to discuss with you, I told Julian after dinner. Claire informed me that the legal process has progressed well. The authorities found some of the scammers who tricked you with the crypto. Julian sat up with interest. Does that mean we can recover more money? I nodded cautiously. Possibly, but it also means you will need to testify against them. Julian didn't hesitate for a second. I'll do whatever it takes to help recover the money I lost because of my stupidity. His immediate willingness to cooperate showed me that he was truly committed to making things right. Good. Claire will arrange the necessary meetings with the prosecutors. Julian added, with determination. That night, after Owen left and Julian retired to his cabin, I sat on my porch to reflect in the last 3 months. Julian's transformation had been remarkable, but I knew that 3 months was just the beginning. Real changes, deep changes in a person's character, take years to heal. However, for the first time since that devastating night at the restaurant, I felt something akin to hope. Julian was proving he could be disciplined, humble, and hardworking. More importantly, he was proving he could respect my authority and follow instructions without questioning. These were the basic foundations upon which we might one day rebuild a family relationship. The next day was Sunday, traditionally a day of rest on the ranch. But Julian had developed the habit of using Sundays to study the technical aspects of agriculture, books on cattle ranching, manuals on pecan cultivation, articles on modern irrigation techniques. Seeing my son voluntarily educating himself about my work filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. Julian, I said when I found him reading under a pecan tree, I want to ask you a question. He looked up from his book attentively. What are your plans for after this probationary year ends? Julian closed the book and looked at me seriously. Mom, if you'll let me, I would like to continue working on the ranch, not as your privileged son, but as an employee who has earned his place. His answer surprised me. You don't miss your old life, your office, your suits, your business meetings. Julian shook his head firmly. That life was built on empty ambitions and irresponsible decisions. This life, though simpler, feels more real, more honest. His words reflected a maturity I had never seen in him before. Julian, there are still 9 months left in your probationary period, I reminded him. A lot can change in that time. Julian nodded understandingly. I know, Mom, but I want you to know that with each passing day, I'm more convinced that this is the right path for me. The sincerity in his voice made me feel that maybe, just maybe, I had gotten back the son I thought I had lost forever. That afternoon, as I watched Julian repair a fence under the evening sun, I felt a complex mix of emotions: pride for the transformation I was witnessing, caution for the wounds that were still healing, and hope for the future we might build together. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the possibility of redemption was manifesting itself day by day in my son's honest work. A year after that dinner that changed our lives forever, I woke in the early morning with a different feeling in my chest. Today marked the exact end of Julian's probationary period, and for the first time in 12 months, I felt genuinely optimistic about our family's future. The familiar sound of footsteps in the yard confirmed that Julian was already awake, preparing for another day of work that had completely transformed his. During these 12 months, Julian had met every single condition of the agreement without a single fault. He had worked from dawn till dusk, had learned every aspect of the ranch's operation, and had shown a dedication he never thought he possessed. More importantly, he had recovered a total of $800,000 through the sales of his properties and cooperation with the authorities to pursue the scammers. "Good morning, Mom." Julian greeted me as I left the house. His physical transformation was remarkable, tanned by the sun, muscular from the work with calloused hands that showed a year of honest labor. But his emotional transformation was even more impressive. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a genuine humility and a deep respect for the work and for me. "Good morning, Julian," I replied, but this time my voice had a warmth that had been absent for months. "Today is a special day." Julian nodded with a nervous smile. "Yes, Mom, my year of probation is up." I could see the anxiety in his eyes, wondering what decision I had made about his future. "I want you to know that you have surpassed all my expectations," I told him sincerely. During the morning, we worked together in the fields as we had done hundreds of times over the past year. But this time, I watched every gesture of Julian's with new eyes, the gentle way he treated the animals, the meticulous care with which he pruned the trees, the patience with which he explained farming techniques to new workers. This was the man I had hoped he would become for 42 years. At noon, Claire arrived at the ranch for our scheduled meeting. Throughout the year, she had monitored Julian's progress monthly, and her reports had been consistently positive. "Margaret, in all my years as a lawyer specializing in family cases, I have rarely seen a transformation as complete as Julian's," she told me as we reviewed the final documents. "Julian has met every term of the agreement," Claire continued. "He has returned $800,000 of the $4 million lost, has worked without a salary for 12 months, and has demonstrated a genuine change in his character and values." Julian sat with us, clearly nervous, to hear my final decision about his future on the ranch and in our family. "Julian," I said, looking him directly in the eye, "a year ago, you betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. You stole my trust, forged my signature, and tried to take everything I had worked for over 4 decades." Julian looked down, clearly ashamed by the reminder of his past actions. "But during this year, you have shown that you are capable of change. You have worked harder than any employee I've had in 40 years. You have learned to respect this land and to understand what it means to build something with your own hands. You have shown humility, dedication, and a genuine commitment to doing things right." The emotion in Julian's voice was visible as he listened to my words. "Therefore," I continued, "I have decided to offer you a permanent position on the ranch, not as my automatic heir, but as my junior partner, with a fair salary and the opportunity to participate in operational decisions." Julian looked at me in disbelief, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Really, Mom, you trust me enough for that?" "Julian, complete trust will take years to rebuild," I explained honestly, "but you have shown that you deserve a chance to continue preventing. However, there are conditions." Claire pulled out a new contract we had. "You will continue under legal supervision for the next 3 years. And any significant financial decision requires my explicit approval." Julian immediately accepted all the conditions with it, even reading them. "Mom, just the fact that you're letting me stay is more than I deserve." His tears of gratitude moved me deeply. "Julian, we all deserve second chances when we are willing to work for them." I extended my hand, and when he took it, I felt I was finally getting my son back. That afternoon, we called Owen to share the news. His joy was immediate and genuine. "Julian, I'm so proud of you. You've shown that you can change when you really commit to it." The 3 of us hugged for the first time in over a year. And for the first time since that terrible night, our family felt whole again. During dinner, Julian asked me a question. I had been, "Mom, will you ever be able to completely forgive me for what I did?" I reflected carefully before answering. "Julian, forgiveness isn't a single event. It's a process. Every day you've proved that you've changed. Every honest decision you make, every moment of respect you show me contributes to that." "I no longer feel the anger I felt a year ago," I continued. "I no longer feel the betrayal like an open wound. What I feel now is hope. Hope that you have truly found your way. Hope that we can build a new and better relationship on the foundation of mutual." Julian nodded with tears in his eyes, clearly moved by my words. That night, as I prepared for bed, I reflected on the most challenging year of my life. My son had betrayed me in the most brutal way possible, but he had also given me the opportunity to demonstrate my own strength. I had set firm boundaries, demanded respect, and created the conditions for a true reconciliation based on actions, no empty words. The next day, Julian would officially begin as my junior partner on Srench. He would have a salary, real responsibilities, and the chance to genuinely contribute to the success of the operation he had tried to steal a year earlier. The poetic justice was perfect. The son, who wanted to inherit the ranch without working for it, would now have to earn it day by day with hideous effort. As I fell asleep, I listened to the familiar sounds of the ranch that had been my home for 40, the crickets chirping, the wind in the trees, the distant murmur of the cattle. But there was a new sound that filled me with peace. Julian's footsteps in his cabin, preparing for another day of honest work. The woman who had built an empire with her own hands had shown that no one, not even her own son, could defeat her when she was determined to defend what she had built. But more importantly, she had shown that motherly, combined with firm limits and clear consequences, could create the conditions for genuine redemption. Julian had lost $4 million of my money, but he had found something much more valuable. He had found his soul, his purpose, and his way back home. And I had recovered not only my assets, but hoped that my family could heal and grow stronger than before. Sometimes the most painful betrayals become the most powerful opportunities for growth, forgiveness, and genuine transformation. The ranch that had been the scene of the greatest betrayal of my life would now be the witness to the most beautiful redemption I could imagine. And for the first time in a year, I fell asleep with a smile on my face, knowing the future was full of new and hopeful possibilities.